What's up, real estate business builders? This is going to be an interesting conversation. Jen Hope has a background in digital marketing before it was even called digital marketing. So a high-level executive in the marketing space for a bunch of high-growth startups. And her gifting and her passion at this point is how, and I'm going to let you say it in a better way, Jen, here in a second. But the way I heard it when we were chatting before we went live was, we have a tendency to build our businesses in a way that is very triggering to people around us and probably not exactly the way we want to sort of present ourselves in our businesses and to our teams. But Jen, give a couple, 3 minutes about your background. Why should we lean in and listen to this conversation today?
Yeah, so this business came to be when I was working, like you said, in a marketing executive role in a couple of high growth startups here in the Seattle area, and was sitting watching folks around me, also in leadership positions in startup organizations, really doing like what you're talking about, this leadership from reactive places, and seeing that these folks really needed support, right? The folks who are listening to this podcast are in leadership positions, and we know that position. We know what it's like to be leading an organization. And we have the folks around us who are our team, and they're there to be a support system. They're also there as a teammate, right? We can rely on each other. But some of the depth that we needed support, and raising my own hand, and I think we probably all did this, early in our career when we needed support, maybe we didn't have it, right? And there were folks in my field out in the world talking about burnout, talking about depression, talking about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship in a way that resonated with me and resonated with what I was seeing around me. And I studied psychology and marketing in school. I had this business background, and I had this servant service heart, and was sitting in a meeting one day and we were talking about the same spreadsheet that we had talked about for like 48 weeks prior. And I said, I will not have my butt in a seat talking about the same spreadsheet again, like in the next iteration of this life. And that very startup was acquired by Expedia, and given the opportunity to say like, okay, I'm going to jump into this behemoth thing and look at a bunch more spreadsheets for a bunch more weeks in a row, I was like, I'm out. I had been coaching as a side hustle. And the passion of the folks that I was working with, VP of marketing in a super high growth startup, and was doing this as a side hustle. So it gives you some indication of like the passion behind what I was doing to do this at the same time. And so I made the leap. And so having been there, having made a lot of mistakes, hopefully that's why, and having a passion for this, really, a service-based heart, right? And a human-based heart, and a knack and an appreciation and an excitement about the business world. That's what brings me here today.
Awesome. That's amazing. Part of me just wants to dive into marketing. So I love marketing so much, but we're not going to go there because the reason you're here is around. Let me ask the question this way. I know in my journey, you do the right things in business. So you get busy, and then you're forced to surround yourself with people. And for me, it wasn't like this. And it's probably in the startup world as well. It's not always as thoughtful. It's like, you go do this, you go do that, and you're triggered all the time because you're overwhelmed. I had 2 young kids at the time when my business was really scaling, and newly married, and you're trying to figure all of it out. And it's complete chaos and insanity. And like, let alone like falling into bad food behaviors and, all of the numbing things we do. So talk about, in the environment, where you want to grow and scale, what are some things that you should mind or watch out for as you're putting yourself in a leadership or management position? And you could just start to unpack your frameworks and just do your thing. But I know selfishly for me, I still fall into these old trigger patterns, so I haven't solved it yet. So answer that question. So how would you kind of take us through?
So, there's a couple of frameworks, but I find also story resonates for folks too. So I'll go framework by story, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think of, 2 folks, somebody in real estate, landed in my coaching practice and came to me and is very high performer, landed in my chair, I think really thinking, I'm not really sure how coaching is going to help me, but I know that, it can help me X, Y, and Z, and I'll outperform what I've previously performed. And in unpacking with this person, what we found is that they had perfectionism at a level where it created performance, yes. And what their request was, their goal in coaching was, hey, how do I perform even better, right? And if you go and you look at the numbers, this person is performing at like a 96 most days. And they're trying to close the gap from like 96 to 100, right? On like truly using like behavioral habit tracking platforms. And really like, I didn't do the thing. I didn't meditate for 18 minutes. I missed it that one day when my kid was vomiting. You're like, whoa, dude, like, holy moly, like, how did we get here? Right. And this is that like reactive, right, that you're talking about, and getting into proactive to say, what is balance? What is composure? What does it look like to be in a place where we can look at that individual and say, okay, perfection is getting in the way of good, right? Like, and for this person, what we were able to actually unpack was that this was their almost numbing, right? This was the way that they controlled their environment. This is the way that they did what they did, but it came at this cost. And this cost, a lot of times, was their mental health, right? Where they were the one who was like beating themselves over the head for like the 4%, right? And what we were able to do, and this is why I'm so passionate about this work, is this person was able to find a ton of peace and perform at a better level because what they have is capacity, right? They have, and this is one of the things that I talk about so often, is the capacity to manage when things are bumpy, because they are. Right. And being an entrepreneur and managing what we're managing, incoming as a parent, as as an executive, it's wavy. There's going to be highs and lows. And what we create in coaching is more capacity to withstand that distress and get back to our baseline. Right. So that rebound time is so much faster if, when we hit struggle, we say like, oh, buddy, I'm sorry, this is so hard. Like, today was really rough. And I can get it. And this is what we're telling ourselves, right? The thing that like our best friend would put our arm around us and say like, oh, that day sucked, or that moment, or that thing, or this period of time if we're able to do that, we rebound faster. And that, that I hope is what I see folks do in this process, is evolve from that. Okay, this is how I control it. This is what I've known. This is how I got to where I am today. And when I scale is when I use kindness, is when I take a breath, is when I pause, is when I look at myself with the same compassion, or the compassion that I hope to bring into the world, into the external world. Same thing with drive, right? The same thing can happen with drive, where we put off the thing that we need to do, mental health, boundaries, spending time with our family, doing the thing that fills our cup because, oh, it's this moment. I have to get to revenue. I have to scale to X%. It's the next board meeting. It's always the next board meeting. It's always the next, hit the next milestone. In a place, and working from a place that's truly not sustainable, right? Where we've got Lamborghini engine bicycle brakes effectively. It's not sustainable, right? Yes, we can do that for a period of time. Yes, we can have our foot on the gas for a period of time, but drive is kind of a solo mission. When we're driven with that kind of ambition, it's often like, I have folks think about themselves with like a superhero cape. That doesn't scale. You don't scale. We don't scale as an individual. We scale when we're strategic and relational and collaborative. And those are specific paths, right? Where we were, I see folks move from this reactive place, drive and ambition, to collaboration, to vision, to strategy. And that's how the framework, shows itself in my coaching practice.
That's awesome. And so because we're so hard on ourselves, we are really hard on others, so we have very low empathy for our team members. When we know we could do it better, do it quicker, we have 10 times the capacity, like we think all of these things, and they're always the things that are holding us back. And I've struggled with this, over 15 years. So what are a few of the things, how would you coach someone that is at capacity, so they're putting in real estate, if you're a top agent, you're putting all the hours in, you may have someone in your world that you need to delegate or, push stuff to. But a lot of times you're just fearful that they won't do it the right way. So how would you guide someone through that process when, you're so achievement oriented and you're so driven, you can never turn it off? What are the few things you'd have them sort of think through? Or is it mindset? Is it like tactical sort of daily routines? What are some of the things that we could do?
One of the first things that I do is actually write a job description for someone. So when we know like what our role is and what our role isn't, that can be really helpful for folks to say, okay, if these are my, intentions for, goals for the year, what is my actual job? Because if our job is everyone else's job, unrealistic, right? But also, what is my job for this year? Or what is my job for the next 6 months? And having clarity about our role, I find really relieves anxiety for folks to say, these are the things that, and if we're an ambitious person, we're going to make that job huge anyway, right? We're going to make it probably bigger than we actually can achieve. Cool. Hopefully, as the coach, I'll be able to help folks scale back enough. But really writing that down and saying, this is currently my role, and this is what is realistic through an ambitious lens of what's possible, right? So starting with something that is fairly tactical, but what is my job as CEO today? What does the business need in my role as CEO today? And then trying to be held accountable to sticking to that and making our day-to-day look aligned to that plan. That's one of the first places I start and find folks find relief from the overwhelm of I'm going to do it all myself versus this is what my job description says for the moment.
Yeah. And is it getting that capacity or that margin in your day that allows you to have more empathy? Or is there something I struggle in this area? Most high performers do with empathy. How do you talk through that challenge? How do you have someone slow down? I think you call it self-regulation, but talk about that a little bit. How do you bring out empathy when it's not your natural sort of MO?
I teach it quite literally. I have to, I tell a story a lot, how I learned empathy. I had a coach who would wake up every day and like, mind you, this to me at the time, and still a lot today, I'm like, wow, this is a banana story. But she would wake up in the morning and throw her arms around herself and say, hey, honey, I love you. I hope you have the best day ever. And I'm just rooting for you. And I just love you so, so, so much. And like mind blown that we could imagine a world where this is how we started our day, or that like this was even taught, right? Like that's not how I grew up. Like I was born in the 70s. I'm a Gen Xer, right? So like to me, it was a lot of like, quit your crying, go away, come back when you're done. This was the style, right, of that generation. And so really helping folks to understand like where some of this comes from, right? Like if we were not shown empathy, and empathy wasn't a value or a skill really that was taught to us in our younger years, even in schooling, in the systems that we're a part of, in our families, that we really don't know what it looks like. We don't. And there's no judgment about that. We just don't know. I have never heard in, 38 years of life that somebody could wake up in the morning and throw their arms around themselves and tell themselves that they love them and to have a great day. And if they did, it was hokey. Like, what is happening? And so some of that, it's some of like, okay, what really would it look like if we had empathy for ourselves, right? And it starts there. Our capacity is limited by what we can do for ourselves, right? You're not going to be more kind to someone else than you really are at your deepest level to yourself. We're limited there, right? So if you wake up in the morning and you're like, hey man, get it together. If that's our attitude toward ourselves, or you wake up and again, this is my bias, right? But like, I think we wake up in the morning, we throw the covers off and we're like, I'm going to do my best today. If we wake up thinking, this other person threw off the covers and was like, man, I am going to blow it. Oh, I am going to like really do a pretty crap job today. If that's our headspace, like we probably think the same things about ourselves. And that's what I work on with folks is like, hey, if we woke up today and said, I think I'm going to do my very best, the people around me are doing their very best, it changes the playing field. It's kinder, it lowers the energy, it lowers our aggravation, it lowers like even our own blood pressure, right? If I think you're doing your best, and even if what you're doing is so annoying, I still know that you're doing your best, it changes the game, right? It changes things for folks. And I've seen folks be able to soften to both themselves and to others in that process.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? As I say that, what are you thinking?
Well, it brings up like, me knowing my parents did their best, even though there are like major things like divorced at 4, like dad not present to 15, but I really think they did their best. And it wasn't very great at times, but it was their best. And I think when we get triggered with our spouses, it's the same thing. Like they are doing, given their DNA, how they show up, how they're wired, they are doing their best. Like, I don't think they're out to get me. A lot of times we think people around us are like out, like it's us against them, versus like, hey, we're all in this together. That's really good. And with my kids too, I tell my son a lot, he's 15, and I tell him like, buddy, I'm on your team. You know, like this way that you're talking to me and like thinking that I don't know anything. And like, I promise you, I am your biggest, I can cry thinking about it. Like I am your biggest fan. Like, so let's just skip this part where you think I'm an idiot and everything I'm saying is to hurt you. But just also giving him empathy and remembering what it was like to be a 15-year-old, you know, and how everything wasn't perfect. And, you know, so I really love that. Talk a little bit about communication styles as they relate to leading, or even, you know, in your family or whatever. How do you help? Because my style is, you should know exactly what I'm thinking. When you talk back to me, do it in bullets. I don't care if you're a wordy person, right? It could be a 10-second conversation, or it could be, you know, so I'm not an expert at this, but talk about communication styles.
Okay, I'm going to start with, can I ask you a question? Have you done DISC? Do you know the DISC DISC?
Yeah.
Are
Yep.
you high dominant?
Super high D.
Okay.
I don't think there's an S. I don't think I'm one on the S.
Oh
And
my God, I love it.
I'm a DC.
Okay. I love it. It's so great. Obviously I use DISC a lot, you know, but I love DISC for this purpose, right? So I know, right. And I'm guessing this is the same for you, but like if we're sitting in a room full of folks, high dominance, I'm starting a meeting, right? I'm about to start a meeting and I'm going to give folks a minute to like get settled. I'm going to welcome them. I might say to someone across from me, like, how was your weekend? So great to see you. And the folks who are high dominance are like sitting on their hands. Like, why was this not start? If somebody like starts to turn red, or you notice like splotches on their neck, like these are my high dominance folks, right? Like, and I know that there's somebody who's also like a high influence person who's sitting across the table from me and wants to chat with me about their dog and wants to tell me about their kids' little league and so this to me is like a human decoder system where I can know, hey, what's important to this person sitting across from me? How do they want to be communicated with? And I use this with teams all the time. I teach workshops on DISC specifically because I can know that to you sitting across the table from me, it is going to feel stressful for me to go slow, for me to slow it down and have conversation that is light or fluffy or relational when it is task orientation time for Lars, right? Like, get it done 5 minutes ago. I'm going to like bulldoze the conversation if I have an opportunity. Am I right? Does this sound familiar?
My wife learned about the DISC because she's not a business person, but she's like, yeah, the D stands for something else. Like, you are clearly, when that comes out, you are being a complete D.
I love it.
So yeah, so that is so on point. And DISC is really popular in the real estate world.
Yeah.
I think people will understand that. So how do you deal with that? Like if you're an I, there's a lot of real estate agents that are successful because they're high I.
Totally.
But then they have these C personalities, you know, administrators that come along, SC personalities. Any more advice you'd give to us when we're like scaling with others around us and how to treat people? Is it an awareness?
We need it.
People's like, we all know our own personalities.
So there's a couple of things, right? One is kind of that thing we talked about earlier, where you understand that we'll give the example, right, of the high dominance, right? It's typically it's a task-oriented, fast-paced orientation, right? So if you're looking at 4 quadrants, you're in a very specific quadrant, right? Fast-paced task orientation. For our high I folks, we're fast-paced people orientation. And knowing that there is actually a physiological aspect of that trait happening when we're doing the opposite. For example, the folks who are sitting on their hands because we're high dominance and we're not moving fast enough for them, right? It actually feels stressful to you, right? And it may feel annoying to the person who is needing to go as quickly as you need to go, right? To have it not feel stressful to you. There's a slower paced person opposite the table from you who's saying, I need meticulous information to be able to onboard the task that you're trying to delegate to me. I need those high compliance folks. I'm going to need to know the ins and outs and the details and the programmatic and the systematic way that we're going to do X and Y. Thank you for coming in and swirling through with that tidbit of information, but I'm going to need a lot more than that that from you to get this thing done and to take it off your plate. So if you're going to delegate it to me, slow down, bro, and come have a conversation with me and get me what I need to be able to actually execute on the thing that is so, that as a leader is so important for me to get done well. Right. So it is an understanding about that. And it is a encouragement of the differences that I think creates the empathy, right? You need those folks. You need the folks who are going to slow you down. You need those folks that, while it may feel like nails on a chalkboard to talk through the thing and all the details, right, and to hear someone out, we need that. We need that. If that's the case, that's what you're getting. You're likely getting something that is more balanced and less biased toward your style.
Yeah, I'm smirking because I literally have a Slack thread up over here where I put like probably a 5-hour project on my most competent sort of backstage person, super high C, like 175 C out of 100. And I did it in like 7 words. Like, that's all you need, because you should understand me at this point. And she came back with all of these questions that completely annoyed me. And I know all of it, and I've been through this training, and and it still is like I'm in a day, as I shared before we hit record, where I'm just super off schedule, and I've had to compress things, and I've got a funeral, and I've got 2 volleyball things I've got to coordinate, and so this never goes away, right? So this sort of slowing down and just being a little bit aware of how to sort of serve the people around you. So I just think it's awesome, because it's just a good reminder. Let me ask you this. I've got like a rapid fire questions that I want to take you through as we end, but one more question. You talk about waterfall habits and, the mental and sort of emotional, physical value of some of these habits. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So waterfall habits, what I found is that we all have a place where if we wake up in the morning and check a box, it starts a process of success momentum, right? For some of us, it's, we make our bed. For some of us, it's drink 8 ounces of, lemon water in the morning, a workout, right? Whatever that thing is for you. Some of us, it starts the night before. If I put my phone in the other room and make sure that I'm off of it before I go to sleep at night, it starts a process of success momentum that overflows. And this is the waterfall part of it, where it overflows into other parts of our lives. And if we can start by making that commitment to ourselves, it starts this process. For me, this is a process of meditation. So if I meditate for, X number of minutes in the morning, I'm setting myself up for a day that is likely going to check more of the positive boxes. It's a vote in the positive direction for the person that I want to be, for the leader that I want to be, parent, partner, business owner, coach. And I think, and what I've seen working, with leaders in this with this same tool, is that folks find the thing for themselves that waterfalls into the other categories of their lives. Do you have one of these, Lars? Do you know, like, the thing that if you do it, it sets your day up for success?
Oh yeah. So it's guarding. I have like a 2-hour time block where if I can, well, even before that, I probably have other things. It's definitely, I don't feel right if I put meetings in my morning when I know I want to protect a 2-hour time block to work out and do my infrared sauna and just watch a little bit of brainless YouTube while I'm in this like sauna. That to me is like, all I need is that like 90 minutes to 120 minutes, and then everything else is good in the world. So that's probably it for me.
Yeah, it's a and this is, bring this back to capacity. This is one of those things that's a capacity builder, right? Where that 2 hours gives you enough capacity, brings our stress level down, brings the cortisol down, gives us, if we have, say, from 0 to 100 to be filled with stress or distress, it brings us into that tolerable range that says, like, yes, I'm a human being. Yes, there's stress, but I can manage in that like 30 to 70% range, where above and beyond, we're reactive, right? We're firing off emails that we wish we never sent, or, having a Slack conversation that we wish we had a tiny bit more patience for. It can happen, right? It happens to all of us. It happens to, like, get in the car to your kid where you're like, wow, that was not how I do over. Like, it happens to all of us. And I'm raising my hand because this is, we gotta go. We're late, like 2 5-year-olds. That doesn't work. So yeah, it happens. It happens. So the capacity builders, right? That's the waterfall habits. That's the checkbox for who do I want to be? What am I doing that overflows into the positive? For some folks, this is, I go to church once a week, or I spend time in community, and that really changes things and fills me in a way. Yeah, it's just some examples of how you start it.
I love that visual too, because a 5-year-old in some ways is the same as a team member. They don't have a concept of what's important to you or like time, and here you're getting annoyed, like, what's a schedule? Like, how are we late for something? Like, they don't even have the ability to think through things the way you are thinking through things. And everything with the entrepreneur who seems like they're taking on all the risk and they have all the bills to pay, it's this sense of urgency that is, nobody else has the sense of urgency that we have.
No, we
So,
can't.
yeah.
Can't know what's on the line, right? Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So because you are this interesting, your background is just awesome. And I love what you're doing. And at the same time, you're willing to go out and kill your own meals every day. You're an entrepreneur. I want to ask you a few questions about your business, just lightning round questions, first thing that comes to your mind. So what keeps you up at night when it comes to your business?
Marketing. I left marketing because I didn't want to do marketing anymore. Now I still have to do marketing, right? So really yes and no. And like, what is marketing these days? It's like running a media company. So still doing it every day. Yeah.
What are you most afraid of when it comes to building your business?
Oh, I don't even have an answer to that. What am I most afraid of? It used to be letting people down, but it's not that anymore. That I don't get to do it forever, maybe. That like it's someday I'll, not love it the same way, maybe.
What's the best advice you've ever received about business?
So, the journey to overnight success is 7 years, right? Like for every overnight success you see, it took 7 years in the making. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that one. You shared some of this, but what about is there a personal daily or weekly habit that you love that you want to share with us?
I walk 3 miles every day. It's my favorite hour of my day. It's the time that either I, stick in a podcast smart list for, podcast nerds out there like me. For me to laugh, for me to think. I do retreat with myself. And I'm sure this is something that your folks, know about and use as well, but, time for self and to think and to be away. CEO time. Those are some of like the baseline. I think like you, I carve out time. So I have Mondays. I don't see clients on Monday, and that's my time to, now in post-pandemic life, back to sitting in a Starbucks with earbuds in my ears and doing the things that need to be done and the systems piece of running a business.
Awesome. How about is there an app or internet resource that you'd want to recommend to us?
Absolutely. I use the Calm app daily. They have something called the Daily Move. It's like 7 minutes of movement every day. And for somebody who has a busy brain, I really like that one because it's mindfulness, but you don't have to park your booty on a mat to do that one. Absolutely love that one. Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, is way up there on my favorites. It's the number one thing that I send to clients when we first kick off. And then obviously DISC for teams would be probably the next. Now there are online resources for it, but DISC is way up there too.
Awesome. That was my next question. Literally, if you could recommend one for our listeners, what would the book be? Radical Candor? Probably.
I've thrown the Brene Brown books across the room so many times. I'd have to pick one of hers because they're so good. But the one that Guideposts, her Guidepost book, I think it was the first one, I think is up there in my favorites as well, just because it's so good. Like teaching us the opposite of so many of the things that we do naturally are kind of innately based on how we were raised. And it's like, wow, like you're teaching people to rest and play. Like what? Like that was a mind-blowing early learning and personal development for me.
Awesome. So as we wrap up, agents, the market is just really squirrely. So there's like no inventory. Agents are having to work like 5 times as hard to get a deal right now. Team leaders are stressed in a way because there's not as much business to feed their teams. What advice would you give someone, in that sort of environment, heavy pressure environment that you haven't shared with us already? Some encouragement.
It's a moment, right? It's a season and nothing stays the same. Right? Like as much as we can get caught in our minds with it's always going to be this way. Like, we have the evidence, and you've been doing this long enough to say, like, this is a moment, and there are going to be highs and there are going to be lows, and there's stuff to be learned here, right? This is a time for systems. This is a time for being able to look at the things that we didn't have time to look at when it was wild and squirrely in a different way. And so this moment of slowing down, it is a time to breathe. It is a time to rest and to allow ourselves that, right? We're in hustle culture, particularly in this industry. It's hustle, right? And to do the opposite, if I imagine it like this, if you had a coach who was standing next to you while you were running on a treadmill, there's the coach that you need to bump it up, 0.2 on certain days. And this is the coach who's challenging you to go endurance, right? Like, stay with it, be with it. It's going to be high. It's going to be low. There's going to be moments where we're going to freak out, but like, we get to use this moment to stay regulated, to stay calm, and to know we're going to ride it out. Not, this is always, it's forever changing. And this is also a season just like the other seasons we've seen.
Awesome. I love that. So Jen, what's the best way someone could get in touch with you if they've just totally vibed with your message today? What's the best way someone can connect with you?
I'm at Hey Jen Hope. It's Hey, HEYJENHOPE.com/builders.
Awesome. Awesome. I would definitely recommend, if you are sort of not naturally, I don't think anyone's naturally gifted to lead people anymore. And you've triggered in the ways that I am, all the time, I would definitely reach out to Jen. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been awesome. I love the work that you do, and I hope we keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
All right. Be good.
Take care.